and letters that you have sent since the passing away of my son, Elvis.
Elvis Presley's wealth was believed to be nearly gone when he passed away, but whispers of a hidden fortune refused to fade. Stories spread of secret accounts, lost treasures, and money stashed away from the public eye. Then, a private letter written by his father, Vernon Presley, surfaced. Inside were words that hinted at something far bigger than anyone imagined. Could the king of rock and roll have left behind a fortune carefully hidden from the world? The suspense deepens as this letter raises new questions about what Elvis truly left behind and how it might change the story forever. Vernon Presley, the father behind the king. In the early 1930s, Vernon Presley's world took a sharp turn when he met Gladys Love Smith. He was just 17, while Gladys was 4 years older. Their attraction was undeniable, and despite his youth, Vernon was determined to marry her. To make it happen, he bent the rules, lying about his age on the marriage license. In 1933, the two exchanged vows, sealing a bond that would carry them through struggles, triumphs, and heartbreaks. Their marriage was forged during the harsh years of the Great Depression, when every day was a battle for survival. Vernon and Gladys leaned on one another, their closeness growing stronger with every challenge. Their love was tested but never broken, and it became the foundation of a family story that would later captivate the world. On January 8, 1935, their first son, Elvis Aaron Presley, came into the world. His arrival, however, carried sorrow alongside joy. Elvis was born a twin, but his brother Jesse Garin passed away only 35 minutes earlier. The grief weighed heavily on Vernon and Gladys, yet their sadness was softened by the light Elvis brought into their lives. From the very first day, they wrapped him in unwavering love. Vernon worked endlessly to provide for his family. He accepted whatever jobs he could find: farm labor, delivery driving, and long days of physical toil. Still, money was scarce. In his desperation, he altered a check, a mistake that cost him 8 months in prison. The punishment was crushing, but it also became a turning point. When Vernon returned home, he carried with him a fierce determination never to let his errors control the future. The Presleys remained poor, often relying on neighbors or government support. Yet their household was filled with warmth, music, and devotion. In 1948, Vernon and Gladys made a bold move that would shape Elvis's destiny. They left Tupelo, Mississippi, and headed to Memphis, Tennessee, seeking a better life for their son. At first, the family bounced from room to room, struggling to find stability. Eventually, they landed in Lauderdale Courts, a public housing project. That move proved life-changing. Memphis introduced Elvis to new rhythms, gospel, blues, and rhythm and blues, that would define his style. When he once asked for a motorbike, the family couldn't afford it. Instead, they gave him a guitar. That simple gift altered the course of history. At L.C. Humes High School, Elvis stood out. His unusual style and quiet nature made him a target of teasing, but he clung to his music, carrying his guitar everywhere. Vernon urged him to keep going even when others mocked him. Church services filled with gospel songs gave Elvis even more reason to dream of performing. To understand Vernon's drive, one must look at his own beginnings. He was born on April 10, 1916 in Fulton, Mississippi, the eldest of 5 children of Jesse D. McClowell Presley and Minnie Mae Hood Presley. Life was tough and money was scarce. From childhood, Vernon learned the fragility of financial security. Those early struggles left him with one goal: his son would not suffer the same way. By the early 1950s, Elvis was chasing music seriously. In 1953, he recorded 2 songs at the Memphis Recording Service as a gift for his mother. It seemed small, but it unlocked the path to Sun Records in 1954. When Elvis's fame began to rise, Vernon's role shifted. He was no longer only a father, he became manager and protector. He oversaw contracts, kept a watchful eye on finances, and traveled with his son. For Vernon, this was more than business. It was a promise that Elvis would always have the security he himself had lacked. The bond between them grew even as fame created pressure. Elvis sometimes lashed out under stress, but Vernon remained steady, patient, and loyal. He stood by during the hardest battles, from troubled relationships to the beginnings of substance struggles. Vernon worked tirelessly to protect Elvis's finances from bad deals and greedy outsiders. Their relationship was remarkable because it went beyond the normal ties of father and son. They were true partners. Vernon advised Elvis not only in business but also in personal matters, urging him to keep trusted people close. Elvis didn't always listen, but he never doubted his father's love. There were moments of joy, too. Family gatherings at Graceland, tours across the nation, and countless quiet times shared between them. Vernon was always at Elvis's side, steadying him in the storm of fame. Together, they built a life that rose from nothing to unimaginable heights. Yet, as the story deepened, another powerful chapter awaited. Beyond the bond of father and son, beyond the fame and fortune, lay a love story that would change everything. Before uncovering the fortune Elvis built and how Vernon helped manage it, we must step into the heart of his journey, his romance with the woman who became the love of his life. Elvis and Priscilla, a love story of joy and heartache. In 1959, Elvis Presley was serving with the United States Army in Bad Nauheim, Germany. Already the king of rock and roll, his presence in Europe drew crowds everywhere. One evening at a party filled with music and laughter, 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu walked in. Living in Germany with her family, she could not have imagined that night would change her life forever. Elvis, then 24, stood across the room. A man adored by millions locked eyes with a girl a decade younger. What sparked in that moment was the beginning of a story that the world would never forget. Priscilla was immediately struck by his charm, the kind that seemed to fill the air around him. Elvis, still grieving the loss of his mother Gladys, saw in her innocence a gentle reminder of love he thought was gone. For him, she was a fresh beginning in a world of fame and pressure. For her, being chosen by Elvis felt like stepping into a dream she did not want to wake from. Their bond grew quickly, blossoming into something neither could resist. The years that followed were filled with visits, long conversations, and gifts that tied Priscilla's world closer to his. She shaped her life around him, learning how to exist in the orbit of a star. Though their relationship was unusual, both because of age and Elvis's fame, the bond deepened. Against all odds, the young girl and the global sensation became inseparable. After nearly 8 years, the long courtship ended with a wedding on May 1, 1967. The Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas glittered with cameras and excitement. Elvis, at 32, stood beside Priscilla, who had just turned 21. Their vows were not only about love, but also carefully arranged to fit into Elvis's career. Colonel Tom Parker, always thinking of Elvis's image, pushed for the marriage. He believed the king needed to be seen as a family man. At first, their marriage was full of joy. They moved into Graceland, the heart of Elvis's world, surrounded by family and friends. Elvis doted on Priscilla, showering her with affection while still managing the chaos of his career. Their happiness grew when in February 1968 they welcomed their daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. For Elvis, Lisa was more than a child. She was a second chance at family. Having lost his twin brother at birth, the bond with his daughter ran deep. He embraced fatherhood with pride, finding peace in moments at home, even as fame pressed harder on his life. For Priscilla, motherhood gave purpose and balance against the heavy weight of living in Elvis's shadow. But the glow of marriage soon faded under the spotlight. Every step Priscilla took was watched. Every choice she made was judged. What had seemed glamorous at first became isolating. Behind the gates of Graceland, she often felt alone. Elvis thrived in the spotlight, adored by thousands, but she was left in the silence when he was gone. The loneliness grew heavier with each tour and film. Priscilla turned inward, searching for strength. Karate became her escape, giving her confidence and independence. She later stepped into business, creating her own cosmetics line, carving out an identity beyond being Mrs. Presley. Yet even as she grew, the distance between her and Elvis widened. Calls from hotel rooms could not replace the closeness they once had. Rumors of his affairs haunted her, each one cutting deeper into the trust they had built. By the early 70s, the cracks were too wide to ignore. Priscilla, who had married young and built her life around Elvis, realized she wanted something more. Her growing independence led her into a relationship with her karate instructor, Mike Stone. It was the turning point, the moment she could no longer deny the truth. She still cared for Elvis, but her needs and desires could not be silenced. In 1973, after painful reflection, Priscilla left. Their divorce was filled with heartbreak, but it was not bitter. They shared custody of Lisa Marie and kept a bond as friends. Though their marriage had ended, respect remained. Priscilla stepped forward on her own path, raising her daughter, building her career, yet always speaking with loyalty about the man who had defined so much of her life. Then came August 16, 1977. Elvis Presley, just 42 years old, was gone. The world froze, crowds wept, music stopped. Vernon Presley, his father and closest confidant, was shattered. Lisa Marie, only 9, lost the father she adored. And Priscilla, though no longer his wife, mourned as deeply as ever. She had known him since she was a teenager. His life had shaped hers, and now his death left a silence she could not fill. But out of grief rose determination. Priscilla refused to let the king fade into memory. She transformed Graceland from a private home into a place where millions could celebrate his life. Fans walked the halls where Elvis had once lived, keeping his story alive. Her devotion made sure that the man behind the legend would be remembered not just by those who loved him, but by generations to come. Lisa Marie carried the same torch. As Elvis's only child, the responsibility of his legacy fell on her shoulders. In 1982, she made the bold choice to open Graceland to the public. What began as a necessity soon turned into one of the most visited homes in America. Millions of fans came year after year to step into the world of the king. She went further, overseeing his music and image. Tribute albums, special releases, and even her own duets with Elvis's old recordings kept his voice alive. Each note reminded the world that his music was timeless. Lisa Marie spoke of him with honesty, protecting his memory from those who sought to diminish it. Her devotion made her not just his daughter, but his protector, the heart of his legacy. Through all the challenges, both Priscilla and Lisa Marie ensured that Elvis Presley was not just remembered as a star, but as a man whose life, though cut short, burned brightly. They kept alive the story of his music, his love, and his struggles. But even as his legacy thrived, one question lingered like a shadow. What truly led to the untimely death of Elvis Presley? Going down the drain. When Elvis Presley lost his wife Priscilla in the early 70s, it marked the beginning of a slow but painful fall that no one could stop. Their marriage had been stormy for years, built on passion but weighed down by the pressure of fame and Elvis's restless ways. When she finally left, he felt abandoned, like the ground beneath him had given way. The king of rock and roll was suddenly alone in Graceland, a massive house that now felt empty and cold. At night, friends said he wandered from room to room, unable to sleep, filling the silence with music, food, or pills. The mansion that once echoed with laughter and life became a lonely cage. The emptiness inside him soon pushed him towards something darker. What had begun as simple prescription medicine for pain and sleepless nights grew into a heavy dependence. Doctors and close aides made things worse by keeping him supplied with whatever he asked for. Stimulants lifted him up before concerts, giving him the rush he needed to face the crowds. Sedatives brought him down when the lights went out and the cheers faded away. The cycle became endless, trapping him deeper each time. His body, once full of strength and energy, began to weaken. The sparkle that had made him untouchable now looked faint, hidden under tired eyes and a heavier frame. The addiction wrapped around him like chains, tightening day after day. Money, too, slipped through his fingers. The world believed Elvis was one of the richest men alive, but reality told another story. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, made deals that looked good on the surface but drained Elvis's fortune. The bright lights of Las Vegas pulled in crowds and money, but the contracts were never in Elvis's favor. Parker's own gambling debts only made things worse, swallowing up much of what Elvis earned. By the middle of the 70s, the man who had once been the top-selling artist in the world was working non-stop just to keep going. The shows never ended, not because he wanted to perform, but because he had to. The more he worked, the more trapped he felt. the shadow of fame pressed down heavily on him. He was no longer the fresh young rebel with a guitar, changing music forever. New faces and new sounds had taken over the charts, and though his fans stayed loyal, Elvis felt out of place. The culture around him shifted, but he remained expected to stay the same. Every stage demanded the same fire and charm that had made him a legend 20 years before. The cameras never left him, waiting for that spark. But he was tired, weighed down by the pressure to always be the king. Each time he stepped off stage, the mask slipped, leaving only a man who felt older than his years. Through it all, one figure tried to steady him, his father, Vernon Presley. Vernon had always been a quiet strength in his life, especially after the death of Gladys, Elvis's mother. With her gone, Vernon became protector, advisor, and caretaker. He saw the signs of his son's struggle and worried deeply. He tried to guide him, to remind him of his health, his family, and his responsibilities. He managed the business side of Graceland, making sure everything ran as it should, hoping his steady hand would keep the chaos at bay. But Elvis was too far gone into his own battles. He listened at times, but most of the time he brushed aside his father's advice, burying his pain in the very habits that were destroying him. Vernon never stopped trying. He hoped his care could shield Elvis from the storm. But the weight was too heavy for one man to carry. Graceland remained filled with fans at the gates, flashing lights, and the image of success. But inside its walls lived a man slowly breaking under the burden of being himself. Elvis could still fill arenas and make thousands scream his name. But once the curtain fell, the truth showed. His broken marriage haunted him. His addictions weakened him, money troubles drained him, and the endless demands of fame stole what little peace he had left. Even with his father's love and effort, Elvis could not find a way back. But behind closed doors, he was a man slipping further away, caught in a battle he could not win. The death of Elvis and Vernon. The story of Elvis Presley's final days is as heartbreaking as it is unforgettable. By the summer of 1977, the king of rock and roll was no longer the man fans remembered from the dazzling days of his youth. His once lean frame had grown swollen, his face carried the weight of exhaustion, and the sparkle in his eyes seemed dim. On stage, the voice that had once electrified the world still carried power, but his performances had become uneven, sometimes filled with flashes of brilliance, other times shadowed by weakness. Despite his struggles, he was scheduled to begin another tour. The posters were ready, the tickets sold, and the fans eager. Yet behind the gates of Graceland, Elvis was fighting a quiet battle just to get through each day. On the morning of August 16, 1977, his home grew eerily silent. Elvis, who often kept unusual hours, had not stirred as expected. His fiancée, Ginger Alden, went looking for him. The moment she opened the bathroom door, her world shattered. Elvis lay unconscious on the floor, and though help was summoned immediately, the outcome was already written. Desperate attempts were made to revive him, but the king of rock and roll was gone. At only 42 years old, his body had given out after years of strain, exhaustion, and dependence on prescription substances. The news spread like wildfire. Radios broke into programming, television anchors delivered the announcement with somber voices, and fans across the globe wept. Outside Graceland, crowds formed almost instantly, filling the street with tears, flowers, and disbelief. Many could not accept it. Elvis had seemed larger than life, untouchable, immortal. The thought that such a powerful figure could be gone was unthinkable. Yet it was true. Medical reports later confirmed that heart problems, worsened by long-term misuse of prescription substances, had finally overwhelmed him. His body, pushed too far for too long, could no longer endure. For Vernon Presley, the loss was crushing. He had been more than just Elvis's father. He had been his manager, protector, and closest confidant. From the earliest days of his son's fame, Vernon had stood quietly in the background, making sure things ran smoothly. Now, faced with his son's sudden death, he had to summon strength he did not feel. Vernon took charge of arranging the funeral, determined to ensure that Elvis would be honored in a way fitting for a man loved by millions. On August 18, 1977, Graceland became the center of mourning. Thousands upon thousands of fans lined up for a final glimpse. their grief stretching for miles beyond the mansion's gates. The air was heavy with sorrow, and yet there was also reverence, a sense that the world was saying goodbye to someone who had touched hearts across every corner of the earth. Elvis was laid to rest in the meditation garden at Graceland, close to his beloved mother Gladys. It was a place of peace, chosen carefully so that he would forever remain at home, surrounded by family and memory. But for Vernon, the loss cut too deep. His life had always revolved around Elvis, and now that center was gone. The proud but gentle man who had carried responsibilities quietly on his shoulders found himself adrift. Without his son, he felt an emptiness that nothing could fill. In the months that followed, Vernon's health began to decline rapidly. The grief seemed to weigh on his body as heavily as it did on his heart. Just 2 years after burying his son, Vernon Presley passed away in 1979 at the age of 63. For those who knew him, it felt as if he had simply lost the will to keep going. The bond between father and son had been so strong that when Elvis's light went out, Vernon's faded soon after. Elvis's wealth and properties before and after his death. Elvis Presley lived a life filled with glamour, music, and fame. But behind the dazzling lights and the roaring applause was a complicated financial story. At the height of his career in the 1950s and 1960s, Elvis was not just a star. He was one of the highest-paid performers in the entire world. Record sales broke barriers, movie roles piled up, and concerts brought in staggering amounts of money. With that fortune came an empire of possessions that only added to his larger-than-life image. He owned cars by the dozens, dazzling jewelry, private airplanes, and of course the famous mansion known as Graceland. At one point, it was said that Elvis had more than 100 cars, most of them Cadillacs, which he loved to buy not just for himself, but for friends, family, and even complete strangers. To Elvis, generosity was second nature, and giving away Cadillacs became part of his legend. But while these gestures built his reputation as a man of the people, they also drained his finances in ways few around him truly understood. Graceland itself stood as his greatest treasure. Purchased in 1957 for around $100,000, the mansion quickly became the heart of his world. With its stately halls and acres of land, Graceland represented both security and grandeur. Elvis filled it with bold decorations that reflected his own sense of style and identity. It became a sanctuary where he could retreat from the demands of fame, but also a stage where he entertained friends and family. Later, it would gain even greater significance when the meditation garden was added, the place where Elvis would eventually be laid to rest. Despite all this wealth and property, Elvis's net worth during his lifetime was not nearly as vast as people imagined. By the mid-70s, cracks in his financial foundation began to show. Colonel Tom Parker, his longtime manager, had made deal after deal that was not always in Elvis's best interest. The Las Vegas residencies and relentless touring filled seats and bank accounts, but the contracts, expenses, and Parker's gambling debts took a large share of what Elvis earned. And then there was the spending. Elvis lived large. His entourage, often called the Memphis Mafia, traveled with him everywhere, and Elvis covered their expenses without hesitation. He kept multiple homes, funded projects, and never hesitated to shower those around him with extravagant gifts. His private jet, the Lisa Marie, was a symbol of his success, but also a financial burden, costing hundreds of thousands just to maintain. Elvis was a man who had it all, yet his fortune slipped through his fingers as quickly as it came in. By the time of his death in 1977, Elvis's net worth was estimated at around $5 million. For a man of his global fame, this was shockingly small. Many assumed he was among the richest entertainers alive, but in reality, he was stretched thin. Legal fees, management contracts, and taxes left him with much less than his image suggested. He was wealthy in presence and reputation, but financially he stood on unstable ground. When Elvis passed away, the financial picture grew darker still. Vernon Presley, his father, became the executor of the estate. Vernon worked hard to keep things together, but the costs were crushing. Graceland itself, with its sprawling grounds and heavy upkeep, became a burden instead of a blessing. Taxes loomed and the estate's bank accounts thinned. By the late 1970s, the Presley fortune teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Then came Priscilla Presley. Though she and Elvis had divorced years earlier, she refused to let his legacy or their daughter Lisa Marie's inheritance collapse. Priscilla made bold, forward-thinking choices. The most significant was the decision to open Graceland to the public in 1982. What had once been a private home now became a place of pilgrimage for fans worldwide. The move was risky, opening their personal sanctuary to the world, but it proved to be a masterstroke. Graceland quickly became one of the most visited homes in the United States. Crowds poured in, ticket sales soared, and merchandise flew off the shelves. What had been a financial nightmare turned into the foundation of a booming empire. From this decision, today, Elvis's estate is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, a stunning transformation from the financial struggles that nearly ruined it. From a net worth of just $5 million at his death, the Elvis brand now generates tens of millions each year. The empire that almost collapsed now stands stronger than ever, a lasting testament to his power as an artist and cultural icon. Ownership of Graceland and the Presley estate eventually passed to Lisa Marie Presley, his only child. For years, she controlled the rights, though management was handled by professionals who carefully protected the empire. Lisa Marie ensured that Graceland remained in the family, never to be sold, always to stand as the beating heart of Elvis's memory. Fans still travel across the world to walk its halls, see its treasures, and feel connected to the king. Over the years, rumors began to spread that not all of Elvis's money had been lost. Some believed that hidden accounts or secret fortunes existed, tucked away beyond the reach of Colonel Parker or the tax man. Let's see what Vernon Presley's letter has to say about this. Vernon's private letter confirming the rumors about Elvis's hidden fortune. After Elvis's sudden death, fans and reporters were consumed with questions. How much money had the king really left behind? Was the small net worth the full truth, or was there more hidden away? For years, whispers spread of secret accounts, investments, and even stashes of cash. Many dismissed these as stories born from grief, but then came Vernon Presley's private letter, which gave weight to the rumors. Vernon had always been closely involved in his son's affairs. He knew about every contract, every property, and every bank account. As executor of the estate, it was his duty to settle Elvis's finances. In a private letter that surfaced later, Vernon spoke about funds that had not been widely reported at the time of Elvis's death. This letter hinted that Elvis had indeed set aside money outside of the known estate, perhaps to shield it from heavy taxes, or to ensure his daughter Lisa Marie would be secure. The details in the letter described hidden assets that were not part of the original estate filings. These included money in different accounts, possibly in other states, and valuable items stored away quietly. For many, this confirmed that Elvis had been more careful than people thought. While his lifestyle appeared careless, Vernon's words suggested that Elvis had also been protective of his family's future. The revelation changed how people viewed Elvis's financial story. He was not only a star weighed down by bad management and heavy spending, but also a father who tried, in his own way, to prepare for his daughter. The letter revealed a man who, despite his troubles, cared deeply about leaving something behind. For Vernon, writing this letter was more than an administrative act. It was a father's effort to clear confusion and silence doubts. He wanted people to know that Elvis had not left his family with nothing. The hidden fortune might not have been as large as the legends suggested, but it was real. These funds, together with the estate's later revival through Graceland, gave Lisa Marie security and preserved the Presley name. The mystery of the king's wealth endures forever. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more hidden truths that history tried to silence.